Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of our listeners wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Cut the Carbon podcast. We're your link to climate advocates from across the globe, here to let them tell their own stories on fighting the climate crisis. We talk to our guests about climate matters that matter to them and how their countries are cutting carbon emissions. I'm your host, Patricia Manarang. In our episode today, we have Alyssa Belda from the Philippines, who is also our country facilitator for the Philippines. Alyssa is here to talk about decarbonization of the transport industry. Let's hear a snippet from this episode.
My indicator for a better transport system would be you would see more women, you would see more elderly, you would see more persons with disabilities on our streets. They've been largely pushed out of our spaces because they can't access the city. And when we improve our sidewalks, when we improve our bike lanes, when we invest into more accessible transportation, we give them access as well. We give them the right to the city.
If you'd like to support this podcast and cut the carbon, don't forget to subscribe to our channels and follow us on our socials, which can be found in the description. This interview has been edited for clarity purposes. Some audio issues may arise due to connectivity problems. Hi Alyssa, kamusta ka? How are you? Before we begin, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, I'm Alyssa Belda. I've been a development worker in the transport sector for the past 3 or 4 years, give or take. So right now, I'm the community coordinator for the Make It Safer movement, which is an active transport advocacy group for pedestrians, cyclists, persons with disabilities, or even car users. We do a bunch of campaigns regarding transport. Some of the things we've been doing lately, we've recently launched a Safe Spaces campaign because of the issues surrounding women's safety in car-free spaces. We also currently have a lot of reclaiming spaces campaigns. We did one in Maginhawa Street here in Metro Manila, where there was a tactical urbanism project. And we do frequent discussions about active transport and in the Philippines. That's it.
Usually, we ask our guests to describe how climate change affects their country, but since I too am from the Philippines, let me be the one to talk about it. The Philippines is a tropical country with high temperatures and high humidity. We've experienced heat waves so extreme that public schools suspended classes last year in 2024 for a time. Our geographical location also makes us susceptible to super typhoons. The country experiences an average of 20 tropical cyclones each year. One example was Super Typhoon Yolanda that resulted in 6,300 deaths. We are a developing country in Southeast Asia with not a lot of resources. We've got your typical systematic problems like corruption, political dynasties, etc., and that makes it difficult for us to cope with the impacts of climate change. Now that our listeners have a bit of information on the Philippines, let's get started. Alyssa, what does decarbonizing transport actually mean? What does it entail?
I've been hearing this a lot, and then I've attended countless seminars about it, and it's always the same. It's about electric vehicles, about modernizing our jeepneys, different stuff like that. One of my reflections lately is how decarbonizing transport also means bringing our social services closer or more accessible to the people. For example, it's counterintuitive to promote electric buses or electric vehicles when someone has to travel from, for example, Bulacan to Pasay for their everyday commute, because that's a lot of energy involved. It doesn't just become a conversation on how we source our energy, like is it renewable or not, but it's also a question on why do people travel so far? Just to have a livable wage, just to be able to provide for their families, stuff like that. There's a lot of things that we have to discuss when it comes to decarbonizing transport. It's also another conversation altogether to talk about where our energy sources come from. That very notion of just transition, it's also displacing people, all for the name of decarbonizing transport.
That's an interesting point. Decarbonizing transport is more than just using electric vehicles. We need to consider other factors and systems that'll make EVs more efficient and better for our communities. For our listeners, we do actually have a blog blog post about city-owned EV services up on our website and we'll link it below. Alyssa, you and I know this, but the Philippines traffic is so bad. It's notorious for having some of the worst congestion and travel times in the world. Why are we so dependent on private cars and vehicles in general?
There's a bit of history to it. If I'm not mistaken, we had the PNR railway, which is closed for now for repairs, I think. And some of my friends from Pasig also told me that there were tram lines before in some of the areas there and also in Manila. But then World War II happened and then we had to start over from scratch. There's no going around about it. I feel like a large part of it is because of imperialism and how a lot of these countries would sell their oversupply of cars in the Philippines just to get rid of their surplus. So, for example, in the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program, well, they said that they want to modernize our public transport sector. What it's really doing is just replacing our traditional jeepneys with quote unquote modern ones. When upon further inspection, when we consult those who are actually using these modern jeepneys, it's not even brand new. A lot of it are also refurbished parts from different vehicles. So, and it's not even the newest environmentally compliant vehicles or whatever. It's Euro 4. And if I'm not mistaken, we're at Euro 7 now. There's really that aspect. It's a bit concerning that Japanese car manufacturers, Japanese brands like Toyota, are continuing to increase their sales of vehicles here in the country. But in Japan, they already have figured out their public transport. They know that it's an oversupply of cars or congestion begins from when there's too much cars on the road. So it's a bit counterintuitive when they try to increase the sales here in the Philippines. I feel like also a lot of people buy cars because of our broken public transport system. They would really risk going into debt because they'd rather do that than not be able to move freely.
So there's historical imperialism and our inefficient public transport systems to thank for our dependence on cars and vehicles. In your opinion, how can the Philippines transition away from that? Do we face any particular challenges in doing so?
The Move as One Coalition has a lot of research on budget allocation in the transport sector. So one of their research would say there's really a systemic shortage in our public transport supply. And another would say we have been investing too heavily in rail for so long. We have 99% of our budget, of our transport budget in rail, only 1% for road-based transportation. That's really concerning because rail projects, they take a long time to materialize. And they also say that even with rail projects existing, you can't really take away road-based transportation. And we see that successfully in other countries that they are not just dependent on their rail lines. In the Philippines, it's really unwalkable. Rappler recently published this article and a corresponding video about footbridges in Metro Manila. I think that's one of the underlying reasons also because last year our national budget for active transport was 1 billion. But this year, around 60 million, if I'm not mistaken. That's a really big jump from 1 billion to only 60 million for active transport. And it's really concerning because everyone is a pedestrian, even car users, because you don't magically transport from your house to your car or from the parking lot to your office. Everyone needs pedestrian infrastructure. It's really concerning how little our national budget is being allocated for mass transit, and instead a lot of it is spent on railways. And even railways actually, it's essentially useless if people cannot even access it. If a person with disability cannot access our busways or railways, it's essentially useless. One of the biggest challenges really in a country is political will. What else? Budget allocation, corruption, a lot of those things that we already know. A lot of people come to work to Manila because of the higher minimum wage. I saw one Facebook reel from a Filipino influencer. There's two hardware stores that are 1 footbridge away from each other. But if you cross one to the other, the minimum wage changes. If I'm not mistaken, it's Manila and then Cainta. So from NCR minimum wage to a provincial minimum wage. That's really concerning because sometimes these borders or these lines are arbitrary. We also often hear remarks from people how it's sometimes much cheaper to go on vacation in Vietnam than to go on vacation within the Philippines. We really have an economic crisis as well and a labor crisis as well in connection with the transport crisis. That's one of the underlying reasons why transport really matters so much because of how much time people are willing to spend on traffic just to earn a higher wage.
So government funds need to focus more on road-based transportation as 99% of the budget is allocated to railways. And from what you're saying, investing more on pedestrian infrastructure and making these more accessible would help us become less dependent on cars. You talked about making pedestrian infrastructure better, and I completely agree. It is difficult to choose to walk when our sidewalks are broken, there's a pole or a tree in the middle which makes you have to step onto the street, or the footbridges are so steep that they're almost dangerous. Aside from the typical problems, we also have the labor crisis and the economic crisis that moves people to big cities like Manila and making congestion much worse. You mentioned briefly the jeepney modernization program, but it's not really the best for the environment. Does the Philippine government have any other moves to decarbonize transport more efficiently? Are there any grassroots movements from society that are pushing for certain policies?
I think if I'm not mistaken, the Active Transport Project Office, which is under the OTR, it was established around the pandemic, and a lot of active transport offices in our LGUs in Metro Manila. Also, they were strengthened because of the active transport advocacy during the pandemic. It was a real turning point for active transport, which is cycling or walking. Our systems in the government that advocate for active transport is definitely better now compared to before. There's a lot of big good developments. Like for example, in DOH, they released a memo encouraging our health facilities to have active transport facilities. We also have the Philippine Bicycle Act, which is currently in Congress, which aims to promote bicycles as a main mode of transportation. Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of good government moves to decarbonize transport, but it's simply not enough. So what civil society has been doing, ranging from PUV modernization to active transport advocacy, everyone really understands what it means to decarbonize transport, or even labor groups. I think they're also calling for the abolishment of the minimum wage board and also increasing our minimum wage. Like what we discussed before, that's also key in decarbonizing our transport because it means people move less.
So, civil society is aware of the need to decarbonize, and the government has some policies in place, but these still aren't enough. Aside from the obvious benefits, such as making commuting easier and being good for the planet, are there any benefits to decarbonizing transport for us Filipinos?
For us living in the Philippines, I guess, yeah, of course, number one would be safer commutes, more reliable commutes. My indicator for a better transport system would be you would see more women, you would see more elderly, you would see more persons with disabilities on our streets. They've been largely pushed out of our spaces because they can't access the city. And when we improve our sidewalks, when we improve our bike lanes, when we invest into more accessible transportation, we give them access as well. We give them the right to the city. Sometimes decarbonizing transport, it isn't as simple as converting all the vehicles to electric vehicles. Because number one, we don't have a national industry for that yet. We're still an import-dependent country. We still source a lot of our machines or stuff like that from overseas. We don't have our own industry, and some of these local programs like the public transport modernization program, what it's really doing is also phasing out our local manufacturers and instead only allowing bigger players to participate in the program because they don't have that much. I feel like instead of zeroing in on importing quote unquote better vehicles. We should be strengthening our local manufacturers. We should be rehabilitating our traditional jeepneys. Is buying an entirely new vehicle or an entirely new quote unquote modern jeepney really more sustainable than rehabilitating an existing traditional jeepney? Our public utility vehicles, or our PUVs, only comprise of around 1% of the vehicles in the Philippines. But still, they're the ones getting pressured to be electrified. 99% are probably emitting those carbon emissions, but we're ignoring it and instead zeroing in on the 1%. In summary, the number one benefit would be greater access for marginalized sectors. Number two would be we should be strengthening our local manufacturers' economy.
Safer and more efficient commutes, accessibility for certain groups, and strengthening our local manufacturers are the additional positive effects of decarbonizing transport. It's interesting to see that addressing the transport sector's carbon emissions solves not only environmental issues, but also safety, labor, and economic ones. Everything is interconnected. When we participate in the fight against the climate crisis, we can also address other problems. It's human rights, it's gender equality, it's everything. You can see how linked they are to the climate based on the stories from our previous episodes. You mentioned earlier that civil society is aware of the need to decarbonize transport. What can those who aren't part of movements do to get involved? How do they get started?
For me, I think what really opened my eyes to this advocacy was when I was in my first year college. So I had to move out of my city to the city of Manila, which is 10 kilometers away. It's so depressing when you think about it that I had to live in a dorm for a school that was 10 kilometers, roughly 10 kilometers away because of the transport system. So I was an art and design student, so I made the choice to live closer to my school because we have a lot of materials in the course. It's just simply not possible for me to try to bring that every day to school. And I'm really lucky. I'm one of few lucky ones who had that privilege. That's one of the things that really, opened my eyes to the state of our public transport. Like, it shouldn't be this way. I joined the Facebook group called How's Your Viaje Bes?
For our listeners, how's your biyahe best basically translates to how's your commute bestie.
I would read and participate in the discussions that they would do there. So I guess that's one thing also, trying to learn more about it, understand the roots of it. But of course, you can also join us at the Make It Safer movement, bit.ly/join mismo. We also do a lot of discussions. If you're based in Manila, you can come join our events. But if not, we also try to do some digital events so that people from all over the country can listen in or participate. There's a lot of things that you can do. Every little thing counts. I feel like it's a lot easier now to join some public consultations. Although it's not really the same because physical on ground public consultation are still really, really important. But I feel like there's a more conscious move now to give people options on how they can participate in a public consultation. And I think that's in part thanks to the orgs here in the Philippines, like the Move As One Coalition. I joined the Move As One Coalition as a young mobility leader, and they really trained us how to participate in these different democratic channels, how to channel your energies into public democratic processes. I feel like you should try and get in touch with your local government. If you live in Quezon City, they have monthly consultations with local bike groups about their active transport projects and infrastructure. Maybe the other LGUs also have that. You can check in. Yeah, and you can also follow Department of Transportation, the different agencies that are involved, and see if they have public consultations. Of course, 2025 elections is upon us. We can see if the senators who are running or if the party lists that are gunning for a seat have our best interests at heart, because if not, that's how we end up with.
I agree. If you want to get started, it's important to research and see what's in your city, what initiatives already exist, and how you can make your voice heard by your government. Check out the Make It Safer movement or Mismo. We'll link all their socials below. Before we end today's episode, Alyssa, do you have any parting insights you'd like to leave our listeners with?
One of the things that I really learned from transport is how we shouldn't entrust it to just straight male engineers. we need more women, we need more queer, we need more persons with disability. We need people from different backgrounds, different walks of life to participate in these conversations about transport. I feel like one of the things that hinder people from participating is like, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a science person, but it's not supposed to be like that. Transport affects everyone. It's something that we do in our daily lives, even if you work from home, because transport isn't just getting from your house to work. I feel like a lot of it is also what opportunities are available to you. Yeah, I would encourage even young people, even if you're not interested in urban planning, for example, you're a teacher, there's lots that you can offer in the space. I myself, I'm not any transport expert. I graduated with a degree in interior design, so don't be intimidated.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Our discussion on transport in the Philippines has been very eye-opening. In this episode, we talked to Alyssa Belda about the challenges the Philippines faces in decarbonizing transport and the other benefits of transitioning. This was a very special episode for me because we're literally talking about my home. Here's a little behind-the-scenes snippet when we had to establish that we'd be talking in English for the entire episode.
And we speak in English.
Yes, unfortunately, we speak in English. Let us know your thoughts about this episode in the comments or through our social media. We'd love to start a discussion with you about today's episode. In our next episode, we talk to John Paul Jos from India about climate advocacy, so keep your ears peeled for that. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and SoundCloud. Follow our Instagram at cut.thecarbon, our Blue Sky at cutthecarbon.bsky.social, and our LinkedIn Cut the Carbon. Visit our website cutthecarbon.eco to learn more about us. Thank you for tuning in. Never forget that the climate crisis isn't fought alone or through only one way. Bye! See you next time!